What's up, traders? So, first live stream. Let's get to it, eh? We're going to talk about some low floats tonight. Just going over the recent week. I actually made a little bit of a watch list per se to go over some of the ones that we have seen throughout the week. One, obviously, that kind of started it all being HUNT or Hunt. We'll just go ahead and start with that. And as you can see, she is actually T12 halted right now. But basically, this thing actually didn't have that low of a float. But let's just completely back up real quick. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to step in and ask, and I'll get to that. But basically, if you don't know what a low float is and you're kind of curious of what it is, it's basically when you take the outstanding shares of a company and whatever's left from whatever the insiders have, whatever they have left in their treasury, it's what's left of that is the float, and that's what's available to the public or retail traders to actually participate in trading on a daily basis. So they tend to offer a lot of volatility, which means that they can spike in, a positive way. If you're in long, if, you'd want it to go up, if you want it to go down, if you're short, you get the drift. So, woohoo. Never thought I'd be live. It's kind of weird. I'm only doing it because I don't feel like making a video tomorrow. And no whiskey, just Coke Zero. Sorry. But however, if you are trading the low floats, obviously just looking at Hunt, there can be some risk involved. And with that being said, there can also be a lot of reward. And I'm going to go to my trade today just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Now, CAD-C had a float of a little bit over 5 million. However, what we're looking for here is the float versus, shares traded throughout the day. Now, this trade happened right at the bell. This is a 5-minute chart. If we go to a 2-minute chart, we'll see that within these, we'll say 6 minutes, there was roughly about 1 million shares traded. So that's 1/5 of the float. Now, if you go to a stock like GBR, which also ran today, you'll see a little bit of a different story. GBR, I believe, was the same float. Yeah, literally the same float, 5 million. So look at how many shares this traded to make its move from all the way down here at the 180 area to all the way up here at the 370 area. Excuse me. You're talking well over, the biggest bar here was 880,000. Remember, this is a 2-minute chart. But you take one of those, easily the float was traded just within from 940 to, we'll say, to 1040. It was traded probably close to twice. And when the float starts rotating like that, let's say the price is coming up and you have, we'll say right here, 6. So we'll say the float was rotated, we'll say the full float was traded by this candle. So within this candle here, 330 from 180, you had the full float traded. Now, once up in this area, we'll just say from 3 to 370, you can almost say that the float was traded in full again. And what that does is now the full float is, since it's been traded, the average price of these shares for the full float is most likely over $3. So what does that mean? What that means is if you're long, it's actually in your favor because the full float is above 3 now. So it's almost kind of set like a new base there. However, what it means if you're long is if you start to see that price, you can, all right, so say you got in short and you luckily got in short at the top and you saw this dropping to that like $3 area, the odds are if you see it start to break below this area, it's going to do exactly what it did because pretty much everyone at this point was above this average on the long side. So they're most likely going to panic sell, get rid of their shares for a profit as it's coming down, like right here. And as it's coming back up, they realize it's not going to make another run. So they're selling, and then the shorts start piling in, and then that's what causes this. And now the float starts to, rotate again, and, it'll bring that overall average float share price, I don't really think there's a term for what I'm trying to explain, down. No, you're hot. Appreciate the support from the ISW guys. It's probably, I'm really just kind of making this video now as a way, instead of editing it, I can just get it out there like this. It'll just be much easier. I can enjoy my day tomorrow. Well, I actually umpire Little League tomorrow and Sunday, so first day of the season. Pretty excited for that. It actually gets me out of the house a little bit. But anyways, back to this. Hopefully that made sense for the most part, that when float rotation happens and you're in a low float stock and there's a ton of volume, the volume is actually making this stock form almost new support levels as she keeps going up. And it works the same in reverse too, as I was saying. So as she comes down and say the full float, trades in this area, now all the shares are, averaging at this 280, 290 area. So if she starts to go up, the odds are shorts are going to start to get out. I mean, that's kind of common sense. And the same way with, if the price starts going down, and you still might even have in this area some longs that were in down here looking for the price to, base out like it was and then start to make a move back up. Once they realize it's not, they're the ones probably selling in here for some profit. And once you run out of sellers eventually, the price will look to start moving back up, which I believe she did a little bit. Yep, right there. And then she just kind of consolidated the rest of the day. And going back into the week, we had RBZ was another one. I think I'm going to have to go to the 5-minute for this one. Yep. This one was just crazy. This one started down here under $10, and she slowly throughout the day on the 27th made a nice move and then came back down. Everyone kind of forgot about it. This was pre-market. She dumped at the bell, came down. Everyone was probably forgetting about it, and then volume started coming in. Now the float on this one is 2.69 million. 2.69 million in the float, and you're talking on this one candle about 106,000. So the the volume was never that huge here, and sometimes that can be a problem too. And let me explain. When you have a low float stock like 2.69 million, and you only have, say, 1 million of those shares actually being traded throughout the day, there's not a lot of traders that are offering their their shares for sale, whether it's, they're looking to go short or they're looking to buy shares or they're looking to sell shares. But say you want to buy shares at, say when the price was right around here, say at $14. There's no one there selling shares at $14. Well, guess what? There's people selling shares at $16. All right. Well, okay. Well, I think this stock's going to the moon, so I'm going to buy them at 16. Well, the next person was like, whoa, I wanted to buy them at 14 too, and I would have bought them at 16, but now no one's there selling them at 16. Well, the next person's selling them at 18. Okay, well, I guess I'll buy them at 18. You see where I'm going with this? And that's how these low volume, low float moves actually happen, is there's just no one selling on the way up. So you have to pay what they're willing to sell at. And the problem with this is it's usually not people buying the shares on the way up. It's usually shorts that are covering their shares. And that's why these are usually called short squeezes, because as the shorts realize, well, crap, there's no one selling at 14 anymore. Oh, crap, now there's no one selling at 16. Now no one at 18, 20, and then it just keeps going up. And you're like, well, when do I get out of this position? And then once one person gets out, the next person's like, well, crap, if now those shares are gone, do I take these or do I hope it comes back down? Well, those shares are gone, and you see the vicious pattern. And Hunt was exactly the same thing. Hunt actually has a higher float of 204 million. The problem is, look at the volume when these moves were happening. I mean, this went from a 3350 to 4463 in one candle on 32,000 volume. So that's literally explaining, or it did exactly what I was just explaining. And in this move later in the day, I mean, it went from 45 area to over 100 right before the day ended. Not one time in a 2-minute span, or is it, I think, am I in 5 minute? Yeah, I'm in 5. So not in a 5-minute span did it ever have over 30,000 in volume traded in 5 minutes. That's crazy. I mean, you remember we were just looking at GBR. On GBR in 5 minutes, it had almost 1.6 million traded. So that just goes to show you how low floats can work with a lot of volume and without a lot of volume. And sorry about the dog snoring, but I can't really stop them. Yeah, RVZ was absolutely nuts. CTRM was another one. Speaking of Kevin here, he actually loves these plays where they'll kind of shoot up. Well, maybe not. This was actually in the after hours, but it was kind of a hangover. She didn't continue in the pre-market that much. She tried a couple times, but I mean, again, this is one that you're going to stay away from anyway, because the float, and just so you guys, this one actually didn't even show me the float. I have my scanners up here that when I'm checking the floats, I'm just going up here. Let's see what GLBS had. GLBS was 3.21. But again, CTRM real quick. This was another one that was just crazy. And this one had okay volume, but it was kind of middle of the road. And if it wasn't showing the float, I mean, here we can, let's see. What was it? I forgot that quick. CTRM. CTRM. Statistics. And so this is actually showing it at under a million, at 810,000. So maybe it wasn't showing on the scanner because maybe it doesn't register anything under a million. I'm pretty sure it does, though, because I've seen it before. So imagine in just this first 5-minute candle, she traded 1/4 of her float, and it was only 265,000. And if you remember, it goes back to what I was trying to explain earlier on how the float rotation, if you get the whole float traded at one price area, that actually usually benefits the longs because you're setting that base level, and it's hard to really kind of get under that because there's no shares to trade under that, because all the people that bought the shares, they're not selling them lower than that. Why would they? But if you have a low float and the volume's coming through, you're going to constantly have people buying and selling those same shares. However, on a higher float, say like a mid cap, say I would like to consider a mid cap, anywhere above, I'd say like 30 million, 25, 30 million, all the way up to like 100 million. Anything over 100 million, I start to consider a high cap. But when you get into those, you're always going to have, I'm trying to think of the words. I actually had something written down for just that. I'll find it later. But it's basically supply and demand. If there's a huge supply and there's buyers and sellers at each level as it's going up, it's harder to move the price up or down. It's really that simple. But on a lower float, if you only have buyers and sellers at like this point and then you jump way up to the next point, that's how it's going to be. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's why a lot of people stay out of the low floats, because they're too volatile for them. So let's go over to GLBS real quick. GLBS was a little bit something more of what I would play. However, this one was more of just a pre-market type mover, and I remember watching this one. But it was a low float, and in pre-market you don't really have that much volume, so it's just that's why in pre-market you'll see these crazy moves all the time, because the supply and demand is just not there. People want the supply, or the demand is there, but there's no supply, so they basically have to take what's there, and that's why you get jumps like this where in this case, you're getting 10-20 cent jumps, and the spread will actually usually be pretty bad, and it's usually like this in pre-market. Like right now it's what is that, 22 cents, and you'll see that in pre-market. It usually comes down when there's actually trading, but at the bell, as you can see, let's zoom in on this one real quick. I hate looking at the 5-minute chart, but sometimes it doesn't let me go back that far on the 2-minute. Yeah, so this is actually it. But you'll see that they make these little pops like this, and right there in the first 2 minutes you had, so this is, no, that's the 28th, so I didn't think it would, because the big move happened back here on the 27th. So if we zoom in real quick, you'll see right at the bell, she actually started down at 368, and she made it all the way up here over 4. You don't necessarily see these moves in larger caps because there's just say for instance she opened at 387 like she did, and you're talking about 100 million float. They can make these moves. It's just a lot harder. It's, imagine, I don't know why tug of war came into my mind, but imagine 100, or it's not too bad of an example, I guess, but imagine 5 really strong people on one side of the rope on playing, doing tug of war, and there's 5 people on the other side that aren't, weak. Say there's buyers on one side and sellers on the other. Obviously, the strong are going to win. So whatever side they're on, whether it's long or short, they're most likely going to win because they're stronger. So in this case, if you are the strong people and you're looking to go long and you're going to power through what's on the ask, basically, you're just going to keep pulling, all those shares off the ask, she's going to rise up. And the same goes if you're short, and which is actually what happened here. Or, because that was actually a really bad example. I'm sorry. I'm going to just silence for 2 seconds. Try to reference that a little bit. Basically, if you have the influence, say there's a catalyst, a news catalyst, and it jumps up, and this is actually a bad stock to be looking at for this. But let's see if I'm trying to find one that, here we go. We use IMTE as an example. Say IMTE had a news catalyst at the bell here, and it caused her to shoot up. That doesn't mean that the news catalyst is a legit news source. I don't want to say source. It doesn't mean it's it might be fake news. It might be PR put out by the company themselves. It might be that the company decided that they're going to try to sneak in an offering. And real quick, let me check the float on IMTE. I think I typed IN, yeah. It's 2.66 million. Most of these stocks that are under $10 with low floats are just trash. They're trash companies. The odds are their fundamentals are trash. Everything about them is usually just junk. And when they make moves like this, the odds are, if you look at the daily, like we are down here, every time they make moves like this, you'll see that they always tend to go back where they came from. Let's take a look at all of these real quick. Hunt. I'm pretty sure this has done this before. Let me see. Nope. Okay, I thought that one did. Maybe it was RBZ. We're just going to look on the weekly so we can go. Why is this not working? Is that a newer IPO? That doesn't make sense. Let's see if it's me or... Why? I'm so confused. Hold on. Let me try thinking. Okay. What? I'm so confused right now. Why is this? There we go. Okay. I don't know what the holy crap. Look at the move this thing made. And that's the other thing too, guys, when say like CAD-C today, when I pulled this chart up, I actually didn't look at the daily, and I should have, because I probably wouldn't have traded it if I did, because look at the moves this thing's made. It's went from, I mean, this was a gap up, it looks like, but she made a move. She opened at 6 or she opened at 2. Am I on the weekly? That's why. No, I'm on the daily. Let's zoom in a little. Oh boy. Maybe I should have just did a video so I could edit all this crap out. Alright, we're almost there. Got a lot of days. Almost there. I promise. I promise. Alright, there we go. So, now that we're zoomed in, I'm a little confused why this keeps saying... There we go. It opened at 615, went to 975. So, the range on this thing was over $4 because it hit a low of 520. Did the same thing over here on almost consecutive days. She opened at 5, was low of 490, went up to 1020. So that's $5 range. And then the very next day, right? Yeah, no, over the weekend. So come back on Monday. So technically the next trading day, she does the same thing pretty much. 625 down to 545, up to 10. So, I mean, it could have been a good indication to short up at 10 because she was just there the day before, and she had previous resistance back here at 975. So that could have been a beautiful short. But that brings me back to over here. I mean, looking left. I mean, today she opened at 347. You know, back here she opened at 225 and went all the way to 680. And I didn't take that into account. I mean, even right here, she opened at 450, went to 560. That's why these low floaters are scary, guys. You know, the only thing I had going for me was the volume. Although the volume did come in, luckily it didn't keep coming in. Because if it kept coming in, that's when you get stocks like GBR. And look what this did. You know, the volume came in. You could have got in down here, which would have been almost the same type of entry point as CAD-C was. And then look at what she does. I mean... Luckily, this isn't a huge move, like, you know, points-wise. But, I mean, she's made big moves in the past. I mean, she's 169 to 475, 590 to almost 13. But then that next day would have been pretty sweet if you top-ticked it. Holy crap, $8. But even back here, opened at 2, went to 444. So, I mean, you get in one of these moves like this looking for the overextension like I do. Being a low floater, they have the capability of doing this because they're trading their float pretty often and they're raising that price. And, you know, luckily enough, we're in a market that isn't really, you know, overly pushing these. I mean, every once in a while we get those, you know, 200%, you know, 1,000% runners like we did with Hunt. But the odds are you're obviously always going to you are going to get these pullbacks. It's just a matter of when. And sometimes you get like these little micro pullbacks before it decides to keep going. And I mean, look at the one it gave you here. So if you were in down here and you're trying to manage this trade, even if you top tick this candle at 333, the low she gives you is pretty much 3, but you're down more than 30 cents at this point. So even if you somehow are managing this trade, and then look what she does. She squeezes all the way up to 370. What if she does the same thing on this candle? She gives you that 30 cents pullback again. And then what if she shot up another 50 cents? And then she just kept doing it. Like, it's possible. Because on the way up, on a low float like this, all the people that are buying and they see it doing this, they're not selling their shares. They're holding on. So that makes the float even lower. So let's just put this into perspective, and we'll use simple numbers. Say the float is 1 million, and say 500,000 people bought to get the price to right here. Now, say these guys, all these 500,000 shares from the buyers that are now long, say this thing's going higher. I'm not selling my shares. I'm gonna wait and see what it does. Now there's only 500,000 shares in the float that are actively being traded. So let's say On this is just short sellers trying to pile in because the price action stopped right here, and they decide to cover right here. So now more of these shares are being bought, and this squeeze up, and let's say 250,000 of those were bought here. And then on this pullback, now you have 750,000 pot. This is just theoretical. This would never actually happen, but it could obviously happen. You have 750,000 shares locked up of the 1 million float. So now there's only 250,000 shares total that could be rotated through. So that just goes to show you, if only those 250,000 shares now up here are being rotated, how easily that could be manipulated to just keep going. And a lot of times that's why ones like Hunt do this, because you only have, like, if you only have 10,000 shares going through, and in those 10,000 shares, you only have people that are like, okay, I bought at 55, I'm not selling until 70. Well, guess what? If people want to get out of that trade, they can only get out at 70 because that's the only place that their shares available. That's how it works, whether there's volume or not volume. If people want to sell here and they're the only people that are selling, that's the only place you're going to be able to sell. It was really that simple. So high volume and news catalysts, those are like the two things you should look for with low floats. I mean, to me. But most of the time, the news catalysts on these low floats are just going to be junk. They're PR. I mean, how many times you see a stock run, not like Hunt, this thing literally ran on no news, but how many times you see a stock run and then you see an offering either same day, and usually not same day, but it'll either happen after the bell that day or the next morning, or intraday the next day, because they got to get the paperwork together, all that good stuff. So I think I got a little off topic. I'm not gonna keep anyone too long. Let's see. Obviously there's risk. I feel like I covered that. I had a whole little like spreadsheet here to go over, and I just kind of said nope right away. I got a little too excited. I wanted to find that thing I was looking for earlier. What are float shares? The float refers to the number of shares that are freely available for trading. And that's why I said, guys, when you look up the float for a stock, it's going to give you a number. That's an on paper number. That's the number that they know for a fact that insiders don't own those shares. It's not shares that they have left in their treasury, stuff like that. The float is what they know to be available to retail traders to trade on the public market. That doesn't mean that that's what is actually being traded. Like I was just explaining, you could have a 1 million share float, but it doesn't mean that all 1 million are being traded. You might have swing traders that have been holding a position for months, 1,000 shares here, 1,000 shares there, 5,000 shares, 10,000 shares, they add up. If you have 10 people with 5,000 shares each of a lower price stock, that adds up. If you have a lower float stock, they're just kind of looking for these squeezes. You never know. There's people out there that do that. Excuse me. So obviously, yeah, the risk of low floats, the volatility that is inherent to a low float stock means that if it can have rapid moves in either direction. I think we've covered that pretty well. Since there are pretty few available shares, the supply and demand can be impacted quickly and drastically based on, news is what I have here. But in some cases like Hunt and whatnot, you don't need news, especially when you have something like Hunt that moves with no news. That's what causes all the, these are just the ones that I listed. There was a bunch this week that just took off for no reason, just because they were low floats. You have those micro floats, the shippers. There's no reason for them to be going nuts, and they were, just because Hunt did, and everyone was looking for those movers to just move. And that's the other thing too, is I actually had this, there's a lot of, I have it written down as fraudulent, but manipulated, I guess is a better word. You have a lot of chat rooms out there that can easily impact, if you're a bigger chat room and you're buying 500,000 shares as a chat room, you can easily, make the price of a stock go crazy. And then you can have other retail traders, it'll pop up on their scanners and they see this. And then, a lot of guys that might not know what they're doing, they FOMO into these trades. Well, this stock's going crazy and Hunt went crazy earlier this week. I don't want to miss this one. And fear of missing out kicks in. You're like, I want to make a lot of money on this one. And then bam, 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 boom, boom, boom. That's where I'm jumping in short, because once you're jumping in, all the guys from that chat room, that's where they're selling because they got their prices lower, front loading per se, waiting for you guys to come in. Not you guys, obviously, but waiting for, the not so experienced traders to start buying their shares because they don't want to miss out. And they're the ones that end up with the bags. And, when you ever get called a bag holder and you don't know what it means, then you're a bag holder. So don't be a bag holder. Which, on the other case, I have right under there, rewards for low float stocks. If you know how to play them and how they move, and you know the history of them, you can look at the daily and see key resistance points, that could possibly be hit. And to me, when you get a lot of volume in a low float stock and you have key resistance points, it doesn't always mean that they're going to work. I mean, they could fly right through them. It really, I don't know. I mean, yeah, they could help, and there's probably going to be a little bit of a fight, if not a huge fight, at those big resistance points. But if a stock really wants to go through and there's just that many traders that just don't know what they're doing, and people are just like, think of it as a herd or a stampede per se. You can have a bomb, but you can throw it right, at the stampede coming at you. But all you're going to do is probably stop the beginning of the stampede, and then the rest of the stampede is just going to, and they're just going to run right after the bomb went off and just keep on going, right? So imagine that. Like, say on the daily that right at $3, this thing had a huge resistance. And as the stampede's coming up, they're like, and you throw that bomb and bam, you kind of stop it right here at 320. You're trying to come back down at 3, and the rest of the stampede that was all back here just said, no, I'm going to keep going. That's kind of the example I was trying to give. So that is what it is. But if you can kind of get in there and, feel out the price action, which is what myself and a lot of the ISW guys do, that's where you can make some money. And this was a tough one. I actually hypothetically traded this today, and I didn't do that great. I actually would have lost money on it. I ended up taking out my last little bit here, but I did start it down here at 250. I actually almost top ticked this. I hit it at, I think it was like 260, but I got a bad fill at like 252, I think it was. In my head, I was looking at, because I always give myself the worst possible numbers that I, fills per se, while I'm hyper trading, just so that I can try to learn from them. Because if you give yourself the best fills, you're not ever going to actually teach yourself something. But, obviously I got caught up adding. I think I added 3 times up into this. I added at 275, I think, too, because she felt like she was done. And then sure enough, she just shot right through that up to 3 something. I added here. I got out those shares. And then that's when she did this move. And I did get one ad. It was somewhere in like 340 area. And then she kept going. And then as you can see, she didn't even come down to my last ad up here. I thought my hypothetical trading account was about to get blown up. She retested that 370 area and she started coming back down. I got out the majority of my position like right in here. And then I obviously was looking for the VWAP touch. And for this area, as you can see, that's kind of where she based out. I was thinking maybe VWAP and this would kind of allow it to hold support. So when she touched VWAP and then came back up and she came back down and touched VWAP again, she started coming back up this third time. I took the rest of it off right there thinking that she was going to do exactly that. And sure enough, she decided to fail. And I actually would have made some pretty good money if I would have stayed in it, but such is trading. But again, it just goes to show you that that's why you don't trade these. They're so hard to trade, and anytime you see a low float, they're tempting because the movement's there, and these are the moves that you're looking for, but you just have to be super careful. And if you are going to play them, size in correctly. You should not be using full position or full size, on your first. I mean, when you're scaling into a position and then you're scaling into a low float position, you should be cutting your normal position at least in half, if not more. I mean, they're dangerous. I mean, they're just dangerous. Look at Hunt and RBZ. It's that simple. I still did not find what I was looking for. But I did write down some steps. Let me look one more time for what I was trying to find. Let me blow this up. Okay, so this is what I was looking for. I found it. So basically, I'll just read it right off here. So I put, since there's not a lot of supply, and if a company announces, good news, these low float stocks can go up 50, 100, 200 plus % in a day, whereas stocks with many publicly available shares can't spike that much. I mean, that's why you see, let's look at Ford. What's Ford's float? Their float is 3.89 billion. So take that into context. We're looking at low float stocks that are 3 million. This is 3.89 billion in the float. So on any given day, look at the volume that this thing gets. It had almost 34 million shares traded today. And if we look at the daily candle, it opened at 880. It hit a low of 871 and a high of 883. So the range was 19 cents for the day, and it traded 34 million shares. Go back to GBR. GBR only traded 18.4 million. She had a low of 181 up to 370, so almost 2 points. See where I'm going with that? But basically, the reason that happens is because there's sellers at every level on the way, that are willing to take profits or cut their losses, et cetera. So if you can really gauge why low float stocks do what they do, it'll really make you understand, one, why you shouldn't trade them until you've watched these things take action for probably years. I still try to trade them, hypothetically, and I'm still scared of them. I should not be trading them. I should just keep watching them. Like CAD-C, I felt was a little bit different today, simply because of the volume that she didn't have yet. Whereas with GBR, when she made her move, she already had that volume coming in, and it was a lot more volume. So that's all there is to that. I shouldn't have traded either, probably because of the float, but I felt a little bit safer in CAD-C. It felt more like a move that I'm accustomed to and that I've seen. And I mean, even this trade wasn't that bad. It's just when all that volume comes in like that, like I said with the Stampede reference, it's just hard to stop. And it really is hard to stop. So we have common stock patterns and technical analysis. I wrote that down. I used to be a big technical analysis trader, support, resistance, EMAs, all that good stuff. But as you can see now, I only have one EMA on my chart. Well, technically two. I have VWAP. And then this is actually the trade line on the 2 minute. And the reason I keep the trade line on there, on the 1 minute, this would be the 20. But on the 2, it's actually the 11. And I just know that usually when you get the VWAP trade line cross, I know a lot of traders are looking for that. So if I'm say this was coming up and I was looking to finally take a position here, I might actually think twice, because look at what's happening. And sure enough, as she crosses over, that's right when she starts to consolidate and make this break. When in all cases, you might think para descending triangle, but that trade line VWAP cross, overpowered it to me, and obviously just being a low float, she can almost just do whatever she wants anyway. But the same applies when it's coming back down too. Obviously, it was a little bit in hindsight on this move, but you can kind of see when she's coming down, she decided to continue. When she consolidated, she just couldn't get enough to even come up and give you that VWAP touch. She just stayed down there. Common stock patterns, it's really just a matter of just knowing how stocks move, guys. They move in waves. Let me pull up this real quick, and you guys can look at this right on the website. But it's literally waves. I mean, the market does this over and over and over. I mean, if you even looking at this, I mean, look, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, until there's just no volume and she kind of just consolidates. So when you're looking at this, I used to be one of them. I would always be the one buying, and like I would have optimism. That's perfect. I would always be in the middle, and I'm like looking for this thing to either go up or hit my stop right under here where I got in. And sure enough, most of the time I would actually be in where it's desperation. Like I think I'm buying a dip looking for it to come back up, and then she drops under that, and now I'm in panic. So I panic sell, and everyone's doing what I used to do. And then you're down here, and if I didn't get out, now I'm definitely getting out. And then I didn't realize that that's where you should be getting in in the first place. So I actually, and that's on the long side, obviously. I'm more of this way, some, people see the price going up. Like just for instance, you have the price going up, 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 and then everyone's like, oh my God, this thing's going crazy. I need to get in. So they get in, and it keeps making the price go up, and then it kind of consolidates, and they're like, okay, some people are taking profits, probably the smart ones, because they thought it was going to do what it did over here. But then sure enough, people are like, oh no, trade line, VWAP cross, get in. And then so everyone gets in, and sure enough, it goes up to here. And now you got a bunch of people just buying. They're like, oh, this thing's going to go to 4 for sure now. Look how close it is. And then sure enough, she starts to come down. And, this is where the euphoria is, like right in here. This is where you would consider the euphoria. And this is where people are still buying, thinking this thing's going to 4. And I can't say that I wasn't one of them at one point. I'm like, I missed this whole move. It would have been so sweet to be in at 2. And I was like, well, this thing's definitely going to 4. It went from 2 to 370. It's got to go to 4, right? And then sure enough, you get dumped on, and you're like, okay, well, I'll just give it to VWAP. Oh, look, and then it bounces off VWAP. You're like, yeah, that's right. I knew I was right. And then sure enough, it starts coming up, and then pow, right through VWAP. And then this is where the panic selling comes in. And then this is the bottom where it starts all over again. So you get the big wave, the euphoria, which is where you should be getting in if you're shorting, obviously. And then comes back down, and this is the panic selling, and then this is where you should be buying long if you're looking to scoop up some shares. And sure enough, even if you did get in here somewhere, even we'll say at the high of this candle of 287, you could have got out for pennies. But it does show you that it works in waves. I mean, sometimes the waves aren't perfect waves, obviously, but they are waves, and it's that simple. So that'll cut it for number 1. That was common stock and technical analysis. 2 is fundamental analysis. And the way I trade now, I don't include this at all, but I will show you what I'm talking about. If you go to Yahoo Finance, it's definitely the best place to look. But you can come down here and you can find everything about a company. And what are we looking at? CTRM. Let's look at Hunt, just for. So, did I type in Hunt? Oh, I was like, that the price didn't look right. There we go. So you come down to Hunt, and they don't even have this information. So it just goes to show you that they're junk. Let's go to, what was the one we just traded today? CADC. 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 So let's go down here, and you can see, just like I thought, like I like to look at the EBITDA. Um, trying to, let me see something. If you look at the EBIT, I'm trying to remember what it means. Earnings before, and let me just look it up. I know it's like earnings before interest and tax or something. What is EBIT? Earnings before, okay, so earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Okay, so basically that's what they're bringing in before they have to pay anything. And so if you're in the negative, that's obviously not good. So, and then you can come down here and you can look at like how much cash they have. So they got 1.8 in the bank, but then you can see how much debt they got, which they got 25 mil in debt. And then the last one I look at is their cash flow. So they don't have any cash flow. They got a lot of debt. The cash they got in the bank is not that much. And before taxes and everything, their EBITDA is negative 1.98 million, which is not good. So it's showing their revenue is 45 million, but you can see that number, but this is the number that really matters. Then you can come up here and check out all the other stuff if you want. And this is under the statistics tab on Yahoo Finance. But sometimes that matters. Like if you're looking, like if you get into a trade and you're just kind of adding and you're wondering why this thing's moving, you know, and you're trying to figure out if it's probably going to move up and stay up, then you can look at the fundamentals. But if you're looking at the fundamentals and you're like, yeah, this is just another trash company, and you're looking at the daily and you're like, yeah, this thing's going to just come back down under 2 eventually and consolidate. And if you're someone that has no problem holding shares overnight, over the weekend, you know, for a couple weeks, sometimes even a month, you know, sometimes you can just average up, and if you got the account for it, you can just wait for these to come back down. And in this case, you know, if you averaged up somewhere in here, you know, around 340, she came all the way back down to 220, and she's probably going to go down even further. So that is what it is. A lot of these garbage companies, they do this and then they go right back to where they came from. So if you have the account where you can sit here and hold these for days, weeks, or maybe even months if you have to, like this guy, she went up to 1275 back in July, and then the next day she went back all the way down to 4. I'm sure there was something that happened. There was probably news or bogus PR, you know, just something, whatever drives it up like that. An offering, you know, it could be a lot of things, but the odds are they are going to go back to where they came from. So it's just another thing another way to trade. And I used to trade that way too, but I like to look at money per hour type things now, you know, and I don't like being in positions overnight. I had a bad experience. What's up, man? How you doing? Sorry, I hope you haven't been here that long and I didn't respond to you. I have my chat over here on a different screen that's not very visible, so. How you doing tonight? Number 3. We'll get to number 3 real quick. Actually I have one, where it's on, is it on my laptop? I think it's on my laptop. I'm not sure. It's not on my computer, which is dumb, but I've come to know a lot of these already. But create a low float stock list, like a watch list. I don't do it here because I like to try to keep this clean, and I try to keep it to like what I'm actually watching on a daily basis. But take a piece of paper and like put it up on the wall, you know, something that lists all the low float stocks. So when you see something going crazy on the scanner and you're not sure, if you don't want to like eventually if you keep looking at the same thing over and over again and it pops up, a lot of these stocks just repeat what they're doing. As you can see on the dailies, they do this all the time. So if you start to get accustomed of seeing it over and over again, especially with the same stock, you know, in the ISW room, and one of my other buddies, you know, there's certain stocks, like my one buddy, he hates shippers, all the shippers. He just hates how they trade. But they're all low float stocks that make these same kind of moves, and a lot of them are hard to borrow anyway, so it wouldn't really apply to me. But if you know that it's a low float, you don't have to take that time, those valuable seconds sometimes to look up what the float is. If you already know it's a low float or have, a quick reference point, up on the wall somewhere. So if you have these actually written down somewhere, and as you're writing them down, it helps you remember as well. Sometimes when you just hear a stock or see it on the scanner and immediately what to expect from that stock. He's really snoring, huh? I'm a little jealous. So with that said, let's move to number 4, which is you want to look for these low floats with higher volume. Now I've showed you why you don't want low volume, and we'll go back to Hunt as an example. Why is it not coming up? As an example with Hunt, if there's no volume, you're going to pay what the couple people that are selling their shares or, letting you, if you want to short, I guess that's different. But if you're looking to sell your shares that you bought or cover shares that you shorted and they only have them at a certain price, it is what it is. So you want to find stocks like CADC, for instance, that don't have too much volume if it's a low float, to where the float is being rotated over and over again. But you want it to have enough volume to where it's liquid. And by liquid, I mean there's shares available at all time to trade in and out. So that's a big thing. And then number 5 is, to me, just one of the best things, is to just learn. Keep learning. If you're always learning and you want the will to learn, you're going to learn. Like, I have such a passion for the stock market and just wanting to learn. Obviously, I would like to make money. Just notice that this is now an SSR, which doesn't really matter. Just keep learning, whether it's from someone like me that just bored you for the last hour, whether it's from anybody on YouTube that is trading the strategy that you want to trade. Learn, even if you're learning something that you feel is wrong, you're still learning, because at some point you're now questioning somebody else and their methods when you have your own methods. And so you're kind of, trying to figure out who's right, what works best for you, and just go from there. If it's technical analysis you want to learn, go for it. If it's price action you want to learn, go for it. If it, just anything, if there's something you want to learn, just type it in Google, type it in YouTube, and just start watching, start reading. The more that you read, the more you're going to see similarities across the board or discrepancies across the board. And you're going to start to pick up on what might actually be the truth. Now, if you ever have a question for me, I'm going to do my best to tell you the truth, because that's just who I am. I'm blunt, and, I'm never going to call somebody a bad trader, because you might not be trading well now, but the goal is to get better. I've been actively day trading since August of last year, so I don't even have a year under my belt, but I feel like I have a grasp on the market as far as understanding what I'm looking for from the market, what I'm looking to achieve in the future from the market, and how I plan to get there. And it's definitely not quick. It's definitely not a get rich quick thing, and don't ever think that it is. But I think this was long enough, and I think I went over enough to where if someone actually does sit through this, that they'll understand it. But if you have any additional questions or comments, just leave them down below, and we'll get to them. Obviously, like and subscribe. Always appreciate that. I would assume if you're here, you probably already are subscribed. But if not, you should subscribe. My second name is PewDiePie. Subscribe to PewDiePie. No, I'm just kidding. But Mr. Beast, if you're watching this, donations are always welcome. I guess GDT, and if Jonathan's here, they're probably mad that I didn't set up any kind of donations. I probably would have brought out the not whiskey. Maybe some apple juice to mimic Jonathan. otherwise known as Lone Wolf Day Trading. Check those guys out. Kev Avery was here. Appreciate that. Check all those guys out, obviously. They're part of the ISW team. Not Jonathan, but he should be. He's too busy making awesome cryptocurrency. It's called Circuit Coin. He's trying to teach me crypto. I don't want nothing to do with it, to be honest, but I'm always open to ideas. I'm too busy trying to figure out the equities, let alone lottery tickets with cryptocurrency. But with that guy said, I obviously will not be here tomorrow. This is what I was going to do tomorrow. I decided to just try out this whole live stream thing. And I hope you guys have a good weekend. Maybe I can look to make this more of a Friday night thing as hopefully the channel grows a little bit. And we can just pick a subject every week and go over it. Talk to you guys later. Peace. Stop streaming. Where's the stop streaming button?